Welcome to Chris's Bread. Today we're going to learn how to make gluten-free bread. Gluten is a protein in the wheat flour. It is stretchy and that's why it keeps all the air pockets together and stretches and it makes bread nice and airy, light, and also it's chewy texture. Gluten-free flour doesn't have that, so we have to add binding agents to hold together all the gluten-free flours. So the bread is a little denser than regular wheat flour bread. We can mix our own gluten-free flours, which I will in the future lessons. But today, to make it easy for people to go out and buy a ready-mix gluten-free flour, I'm using Bob's Red Mill all-purpose gluten-free flour. So let's learn how to make gluten-free bread. For this bread, I'm using Bob's Red Mill gluten-free all-purpose baking flour. On the back, it can show you the ratio, how to substitute with the regular flour. And for the binding agent, I'm using 3 different binding agents. One is psyllium, this powdery psyllium. You want to mix it with your flour really well, otherwise it will be very lumpy if it's not well mixed. So we're going to mix it really well. To measure the flour, I would recommend use a scale because it's a mixture of different flours and you don't know if you pack it very well, it's gonna mess up your recipe. It's my habit to mix my liquid with the yeast first. You can do the other way around. You can mix all your dry ingredients and put your liquid. The other binding agent is flaxseed meal. If you put it in a hot water, it's gonna be this sticky, gooey texture that will hold the gluten-free flour. And the other one is egg. Egg also holds the flour together. And we're gonna mix everything, sugar, salt, and then add flour a little at a time. Because it's gonna much easier compared to the regular gluten flour bread, because we don't have to knead until build the gluten, so that saves time. And also you can use a first rise and second rise, but you don't have to. You can use only one rise. After you mix it, you can shape it and rise it and stick it in the oven. So we're gonna shape the dough. When you shape it, I would recommend, if you're doing it first time, make it a little stiff dough so it's easy to work with. Otherwise, gluten-free flours doesn't hold its shape well together. So you can use a bread pan if you want. If it's not holding together, you can wet your hand and then kind of glue it together at the surface. I had a little bit leftover of flaxseed that I soaked, so I'm putting in my bread. You will notice it later on. I am wetting my hand and patting it down to put a nice shape to it. And we're gonna put it on the parchment paper. You can use a bread pan. And I'm gonna let it rise on a room temperature. Lately I'm using this plastic bag to put my rising bread, and rather than covering up with towel or plastic wrap, and it's working really well. Okay, now it's risen some, so we're gonna put it in the oven. We're gonna sprinkle gluten-free flour and nicely spread it on top. And when you score the bread with knife, be really careful, because it's not same as gluten flour. It's not gonna hold it well, so we have to be
very careful when we cut it. So we're gonna score the top. You can see that it's kind of crumbling a little bit. And we already heat up the oven 20-30 minutes prior to putting the bread. And I'm using similar technique that I use sourdough bread. Put it on my baking stone, and I'm gonna cover it up with the pan. And also I tend to put water on the bottom pan, just get some steam, even though it's covered. Just want to make sure the oven is nice steamy. And I covered 20 minutes and uncovered 20 minutes or more. Some recipe says you make sure cook it really well, otherwise it's gonna be undercooked. Up to 60 minutes or 90 minutes, depending on the temperature of the oven. Now it's come out nice looking, and make sure you cool it down really well before you're cutting. Some recommend at least 2 hours up to 24 hours, so it's really cooled down well, because it doesn't have that air pockets as a regular wheat bread. And it depends on taste. This depends on what's the mixture of the gluten-free flour. For this, the flour I use for this recipe, most of them, the highest amount was garbanzo bean, so it had a little bit of bean taste to it, but when I toasted it tasted a little bit better. So now you know how to make gluten-free bread, and just experiment it and enjoy your gluten-free bread.